Research and Innovation Funding session of the SEAI Energy Show. So, my name is Kerry Sheehan. I'm the head of Research and Technology in SEAI. I'm just going to run you through what's going to happen very quickly and who we are and what we're up to before I hand over to my colleagues to tell you more details. So, very briefly, we are at the welcome, and then Lucy Corcoran here will talk you through the Irish research funding opportunities, and then Louise Campion here will talk through the international funding opportunities. And then we're joined by two industry grantees of both European and Irish funding who are going to talk about their experience and highlight the opportunities and sometimes challenges as part of this journey. And then we'll open up for questions. So we've got 15-20 minutes for you to talk to any of our panel members here. Okay, so in SEAI, I know you're at the Energy Show, but in SEAI, we work with government, homeowners, business and communities to create a cleaner energy future. And research really is to inform on those solutions to deliver the impact. And we're going to talk today how we're going to help you do that. Now, very briefly, I'm sure all of you are very familiar with SEAI in terms of retrofit or the EVs or business direct supports or public sector. But today you're in the Research and Policy Insights Directorate area. And we're really the analytical arm of SEAI. We work with, we coordinate the evidence base to inform on emerging policy and really for what's coming next. And part of that is really important of the research funding, and it's not just our in-house, which is indeed approximately 40 people across the whole directorate. And it is, if we look across these minding the gap aspects, to be right now, we're looking at insights of where we're at now. You'll often hear the annual figures coming through, and that's an analytical team within here. And also on the delivery teams, monitoring and evaluating, going back to the landscape has evolved and changed, and also measuring against the original objectives is very important, that we're constantly evaluating. And then on the future, and this is really what the subject for today, is getting the insights to fill those gaps and providing the supports to the ecosystem to do that. Okay, first up, Lucy, if you could come up and talk to us about that. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry, and hello, everyone. My name is Lucy Corcoran. I'm Programme Manager in SEAI for our Research, Development and Demonstration Funding Programme. And I'll go the right direction with the slides. Yeah, today I'm going to talk about SEAI's supports for research in Ireland. So this slide provides a bit of an overview of everything we're involved in when it comes to funding research, where our mandate is to lead and coordinate research supports in Ireland. And our main funding programme to support research in Ireland is our National Energy Research, Development and Demonstration Funding Programme. We also engage in strategic research partnerships, and we coordinate research through our National Energy Research Funders Forum and internationally through participation in SETPlan, the Strategic Energy Technology Plan Steering Group, and other initiatives. We run an annual conference each year in September, so hopefully some of you have attended that before and look out for it this September, where we're going to be focusing in on energy security. And from the international side, and my colleague Louise will talk about this in more detail, we enable Irish experts to take part in International Energy Agency, TCPs, collaboration initiatives to join other international counterparts researching in specific technology areas. And then finally, we also hold the role of Horizon Europe National Contact Point for Energy, and Louise will talk about that later. But today, I'm delighted to give a preview of our 2023 SEAI Research Funding Call, which is due to launch this Friday. So it's a good opportunity to get a sneak insight into what's coming on Friday. The programme itself supports innovative energy-related research projects that will support Ireland's transition to a clean and secure energy future. And it has four overarching objectives. So firstly, to accelerate the deployment of energy-related products, processes and systems in Ireland, to enable barriers to market to be overcome, to grow our national capacity when it comes to undertaking and applying international class energy research, and finally to provide policy guidance and support. So the program itself went through a significant overhaul in 2018, and since then we've supported approximately 200 research projects with about 55 million in funding awarded over this period, over 4 different calls. And today's call, there will be almost 20 million in funding available to support research in Ireland. So keep an eye out for the details coming this Friday and the preview today. We've also partnered with a number of co-funders over the past 4 years, and this allows us to leverage additional funding for the energy sector, but also to support research in cross-sectoral areas. So by partnering with organisations and state bodies like Department of Transport in the transport energy area, or Department of Agriculture, maybe in relation to bioenergy. And similarly, we've partnered with ESB Networks, ESB, Marine Institute, GSI, and a number of others. So here are some of the key timelines to look out for. So the call will open officially this Friday, the 31st of March. We have a call launch webinar taking place next Wednesday, the 5th of April at 11. So it's an online webinar and free to register. So I'd encourage you to join that. We'll have a bit longer to run through the call details, and there'll be time for questions then as well. The application deadline is 3 p.m. on the 29th of May, which is a Monday. And yeah, really important to get all applications in advance of that deadline to be eligible to progress to the next stages. And then finally, in terms of start dates, projects that are successful through this call would begin to start from Q4, so towards the end of the year and early into next year. So bear that in mind as well when you're building your proposals. And this is the website, but if you look up SEAI or DD, you'll find all the details on our website. And that just a reminder to register for the call launch webinar on next Wednesday. So what is the RDD program? Who can avail of it? What funding is available? Who would be involved in a project team? How are applications evaluated? And what financial details are needed? So I'll run through this now with everyone. And just to highlight here in terms of supporting research across industry and commercial and public bodies, these are some of the companies and organisations that have been supported through the programme since 2021. So we do support research across industry and commercial bodies, as well as public sector and third level educational bodies. And there's a wide range of ways of applying to the call. You can apply to a specific topic where there's an identified research priority or need, or you can apply to the open strand. So if you in your company are interested in a particular area or have a product under development in the energy space, you can apply for funding here, and all applications compete with each other for funding. And again, collaboration is encouraged, so you can apply on your own as one entity, or you can partner with multiple organisations and apply as a consortium. And you can also include collaborators as well, so important stakeholders that might be providing insights towards the project but not requesting funding. So what funding is available? So as I mentioned, there's up to 20 million available in total in this year's call. And the types of costs that might be eligible are those that are directly related to the project you're delivering. So you could request costs relating to staff, overheads on top of staff, postgraduate fees if you're requesting support for PhD students perhaps, equipment and materials, travel costs for if you need to travel to sites or disseminate your research, and then for external consultants. So there's full details in the budget policy in relation to eligible costs, but just to bear that in mind, these are the types of areas that you can request support. And in terms of the scale of project funding, this ranges from small scale and up to max 200,000 in SEAI funding for projects of up to 12 months duration, right up to large scale 4-year projects and up to 1 million in SEAI funding. So they're the typical bands that you can apply for. And of course, you can apply for less than any of these as well. So overheads, just to mention, there's 25% overheads on top of eligible staff costs. And I will run through a little bit more detail, and just do read the budget policy for all the financial details. There's much more information than this available there. And another important thing to bear in mind for commercial bodies in particular to look at funding rates available. So the programme itself is subject to EU state aid, which sets limits on the amount of funding that can be provided. So depending on the type of research, so how early stage it is on the commercial scale, there's different levels of funding that SEAI can provide. So this varies from up to a maximum of 80% and 60% for industrial or experimental development research. And there's intensifiers. So if you're an SME, you can request an additional 20% or a medium a small enterprise 20%, medium enterprise 10%, and there's an additional option of 15% if you're agreeing to widely share your findings and disseminate your research, or if there's a specific consortium of multiple partners involved. And you can see the full details of these definitions and the considerations there when you're deciding whether you're a small or a medium enterprise within the budget policy. So who's in a project team? There are a few key roles. So the lead applicant essentially is the main partner who's applying to the program, and they're responsible for the overall management and technical direction, and they're the primary contact point with SEAI. But also partner applicants are organisations that would take part in the consortium and would request funding but wouldn't be responsible for that core management piece. And collaborators, as I mentioned, are typically not funded partners, but they might be providing valuable intellectual, technical, or other financial contributions to the project. So this could be an option if you want to get started with research. Maybe you haven't taken part in a research proposal before, but potentially taking part as a collaborator could be an option to learn about the process. And again, collaboration is encouraged. So we encourage a collaboration across disciplines, stakeholders, organizations, and with end users of the research as early as possible to make sure that research gets used by those who need it. So how is your application evaluated? There are 3 key evaluation criteria. So is your application excellent? Is it demonstrating innovation? How relevant is the research proposed to, for example, national policy? And what are the potential impacts? So how impactful might it be across social impacts, environmental, economic, and other? So these are 2 of the key criteria, and there's 35% of marks awarded between these 2. And then the final 30% is for quality and efficiency of implementation. So that relates to the overall plans to deliver the project management arrangements, the work plan, the budget requested, and is value for money demonstrated. And just another to bear in mind, because it's a competitive call, SEAI cannot provide feedback on draft proposals, but can provide information on the call itself, but just bear that in mind as well when you're building your application. And there's a really useful guidance in Annex 2 of the call document, which gives a bit more detail on what's expected within each section of the application form. So use that as a tool when you're building your applications. And now I'll talk a little bit about the 2 strands. So we consult in advance of the call with government and state bodies to identify key research priorities for each call. And this is where the topics are identified. So we have about 25 topics in the topic strand, but equally there's an open strand to pitch applications to. So consider that option as well. I'm conscious of time, so I'm gonna, thanks, Matty. I'm gonna speed up a little bit. So we're giving a preview today of some of the topics that are gonna be included in this year's call, but full details will be published on Friday, so have a look on Friday for the full details, but there's a wide range of themes and topic areas coming through in the call this year, from areas like behaviours and data, from in terms of heat and district heating and negative emissions in the sustainable mobility space, looking at mobility as a service, looking at large industry decarbonisation, which might be of interest in terms of high temperature heat pumps and electric thermal storage, and barriers to low carbon heating in industry. And then in terms of electricity, some topics in relation to smart grid and smart metering and data collection, and energy efficiency in approaches for retrofit of rental properties, multi-owner, multi-use dwellings. So there are a couple of the areas, but there's a lot more detail to come, so keep an eye out for that on Friday. For each topic, there's about a page of information to outline what kind of objectives and outputs are expected, and applicants aren't expected to achieve all of these. It's for an idea, I suppose, for where you might come up with something that you feel as a priority that will meet the priority identified in these topics. But I've highlighted in green here to remember that you don't need to fit an application to a topic. There is the open call, and that's a really important reminder for everyone to consider, because there is no budget split between topic and open strand. All applications to the open strand or the topics compete with each other equally for funding, so do keep that in mind. That's a reminder there. So what happens if I'm funded? So what happens? So if you are successful in the call, you will receive a grant agreement or a contract from SEAI, and then you run to deliver your project. In terms of reporting, applicants or awardees are expected to report progress to SEAI every 6 months. So just to remember there, it's important that you remember that costs are reimbursed on a retrospective basis. So every 6 months, awardees would claim for the costs incurred over that 6-month period. And then in terms of engaging your research, again, it's really important to build that team that is needed to provide the input and information and resources and expertise to deliver your specific project. So do consider who you might include on steering committees or at project start dates to make sure that your research is as relevant as possible at the outcome stage. And then in terms of following up results, all applicants or awardees are expected to share some information about the key outcomes of their research, and we make that available on the SEAI website at the end of the project. So this is a slide with some top tips, and it's not very exciting to look at, but there's 9 weeks before the submission deadline. So I'm hoping a lot of people have already started thinking about ideas for where they might apply for funding, and you probably already have ideas from your own experiences, but do start preparing applications as early as possible. And the call launch webinar next week will be a really important opportunity to hear more about the specifics of the programme and to ask questions. So join us next Wednesday for this. And this is probably an obvious one, but do read the call documentation. It's really important to understand what's expected. In particular, things like the breakdown of the evaluation criteria and the guidance on what to include in your application. Building your team. So this can take time. I'm sure this will come through in some of the presentations later. Identify your key partners and collaborators as early as possible, because you will need to gather supporting documentation, letters of support, and financial details from them in time to submit. And in bold, only fully complete applications received in advance of the deadline will progress to valuation. And again, it's not very exciting, but it's very important. So if you haven't submitted some of the mandatory documentation, your application might not be eligible to progress to the next stage. So if you've gone to all the effort of building an application, do make sure you've submitted all the supporting documentation as well. So that's really important. And there's some checklists in our call documents that'll make it easier to just check that you have everything you need at application stage. Applications are submitted through our online portal, the PEP, Project Evaluation Platform, and it's good to log in and set up your profile as early as possible and not in the last hour before a deadline, just in case of some issue when you're registering. So do make sure to log in and create your profile there. And don't leave any sections blank. That's, again, some of this is easy, but it's important to remember. And remember, it's a competitive call, so we get a lot of applications to the programme. And you need to remember that you're competing with everyone else to the call, so do remember that. And again, we can't provide feedback because it's a competitive call. We can't provide feedback on specific applications, so it is up to applicants to decide what to include in your proposals and to submit to SEAI for review. And there, just a reminder again on making sure to submit all information in advance of the deadline. And before I hand over to my colleague, just some spotlights of previous projects supported through the programme. So this project was run by Codema, developing a Dublin Region Energy Master Plan. Another project by Sustainability Works, developing guidelines for financing for energy efficiency in Ireland. The Irish Green Buildings Council developed this research project that resulted in some guidance around introducing minimum energy efficiency performance standards in the rental sector. And a community-focused project here on wind energy, so how to earn local support for wind energy projects in Ireland, led by Aston Eco. And if you're interested in finding out more of projects that have been successful through the programme, have a look at our database online, and you'll find information about these projects that have been funded by SEAI in the past and other national funders. And we're going to hear from two projects about their experiences later, so I won't talk about them now. And I will pause and hand over to my colleague now, Louise Campion, or to Kerry.
Thanks very much, Lucy. I'm sure there's lots of questions brewing. And also, just to let you know, we will be here afterwards. You can come and pop up to us. Okay, now if I could ask Louise Campion to come up and talk to you about our international supports. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Kerry, and thanks, Lucy. So for those who don't know me, my name is Louise Campion. I'm the Programme Manager for International Energy Research here in SEAI. And what that means is that I look after Ireland's engagement in International Energy Agency technology collaboration programmes. and also that I'm the national contact point for Cluster 5 Energy within the Horizon Europe programme. If NCP means nothing to anyone in the room, I'm hoping this presentation will help to demystify the terminology that we have and jargon around international energy funding opportunities. Just to give you a quick overview, I suppose, of what I'll talk about, I'll provide an overview of the Horizon Europe programme itself, followed by a little bit of a deeper dive into Cluster 5 and specifically the energy topics that are available at the moment through the 2023 to 2024 work programme. I'm then going to provide a very high-level overview of other funding instruments that may be of interest to those in the room. And I'll follow on then and conclude with a little bit of information on the enabling supports and further information that you can rely on following this event. So for those of you who aren't aware of Horizon Europe, it's a follow-on from H2020, Horizon 2020, which is a predecessor programme. It's the EU's flagship funding programme for research and innovation, offering a budget of 95 billion between 21 and 27. So there's opportunity for all in there. Its objective is to solve the most significant challenges of our time, from climate change to cancer, and ultimately to help achieve our sustainable development goals. It's based on 3 particular strategic objectives, which are science and technology, society and economy. So what that's hoping to do is to fuel the EU's scientific and technological excellence, to tackle policy priority areas, including the green and digital transition, and to boost Europe's innovation uptake, competitiveness and jobs. So I'm proud to say that Ireland has been very successful to date in terms of Horizon Europe funding programmes. We've been able to leverage 1.54 billion in funding for 2014 to 2022. So we have a track record of excellence in this area, and the EU recognise us as being a strong innovator. I've taken some stats here from one of the dashboards that the European Commission provide through its SEAI portal. And would like to highlight, I suppose, here the achievement of Ireland in respect of Europe as a whole. So we're ranked 13th in the EU out of 28 based on budget share. So you'll see there, out of an 83.9 billion pot to date, we've been able to take that 1.54. And here, the little blue dots, I don't know if you can see that very clearly from where you are, so I'll just explain through the different bars. The second bar is the applications. So we've submitted 21,000 applications out of 1 million plus that have been submitted to date. Of those, 15,000 were eligible. And of those eligible applications, 2,600 received a signed grant. What I'd really like to demonstrate here through those blue boxes is that Ireland has a 6.6% share of the signed grants. So even though we're only submitting 1.8% of the applications, we're getting 6.6 signed. So that means we're submitting really high quality applications, which I think is really important, but also points to yourselves as being people who are really strong collaborators and people who our European counterparts want to engage with. So looking a little bit more through the business lens then, I wanted to pull out the stats that say that 36% of the share of funding has gone to the private sector, and 25% of that overall share is for SMEs specifically. So we certainly have an emerging market here. Looking at the stats further then, I can see that Spain, Germany, Italy and France, as well as the UK, are amongst our top collaborators. So you might have experience with that yourselves. But the little map here, I really like this map. I think it's fantastic. It just shows Ireland's impact in energy research through Horizon across the globe. So there's everything there from New Zealand, Iceland, Taiwan, name it, we've probably collaborated with that country. Madagascar is there as well. So I really like this piece. And just to mention as well that many of the SMEs that are active in the energy space across Horizon Europe are from the energy sector as well. So not only are we leading in Horizon Europe, but we're leading in energy too, which I think is something to be very much proud of. So I'd like to talk a little bit, kind of pick apart Horizon Europe. I know it's changed significantly since H2020, and it can be a little bit of a challenge to understand where do you fit within the nexus or the ecosystem of Horizon Europe. So there's 3 pillars, the first being excellent science, the second is global challenges and European industrial competitiveness, and the third is Innovate Europe. So as the national contact point for Cluster 5, I sit in the little red area there that's called Climate, Energy and Mobility. And it has a budget of 15 billion over the course of the framework programme. Its key objectives are to drive the twin green and digital transition and ultimately to achieve climate neutrality by 2050. Energy specifically then is a component of that, and destinations 3 and 4 are the 2 specific focus areas that really deal with energy within the call. So Destination 3 really looks at energy supply. So it wants to promote leadership in renewable energy space, in energy storage, and in carbon capture, utilization, and storage. And then Destination 4 is about energy use. So the end users, how do we make sure we have an accessible and just transition for Ireland's citizens? So these are very much steered by European policies such as the Renovation Wave, the Green Industrial Plan, and of course the Fit for 55 package. And you'll see that as you work your way through the work programme 23 to 24, which I've linked here. And I definitely recommend get stuck into it if you haven't already. You really want to link your proposals and applications back to the directives and the policies that are pushing that particular agenda. So as I mentioned, the work programme 23 to 24 is really your Bible when it comes to applying for Horizon Europe funding. It sets out all of the criteria and objectives, the impacts that they want to see from your projects, and it's available at the following link. As the NCP and a delegate to the Cluster 5 Programme Committee, it means that SEAI is able to, I suppose, influence on behalf of Ireland what sort of topics and technical areas are included within the calls. So it means we really have an opportunity to influence policy and ensure that it's aligned to the funding that is made available. So for the work programme for 23-24, there's 1.2 billion. That's just in the 2 years, that's this year and next. And there's 88 topics, so there really is something for everybody. I've just provided this graphic here to show very briefly, I suppose, the different funding breakdown from that 1.2. So there's about 1 billion for Destination 3, much larger budget than Destination 4 because of the topic area itself. Some of the topics that you'll see in there are on advanced biofuels, offshore wind, geothermal energy, building management systems, grid optimization and storage. If it's on the policy agenda at the moment, you'll probably see a topic in there. So there's 69 topics across 5 calls in that particular destination. And then in Destination 4, there's 0.21 billion across 4 calls and 19 topics. So in that area, you'd see things like positive energy districts, zero emission buildings, life cycle assessment, smart readiness, materials and construction efficiency. Again, if you want to apply for these, you need to go to the EU funding and tenders portal. I've linked it at the bottom here, but to make your lives even easier, what I've done is I've pulled out all the different calls in the energy sector. I've linked directly to where you can apply to them on this particular site. Obviously the one here that's ending on the 30th of the 3rd, unless you have already your proposal in, I wouldn't recommend trying to apply for that one. And I'm sure we'll hear that from our speakers as well about how organised you really need to be able to submit a successful proposal. But this is also available on the SEAI website. So there's a dedicated platform there for Horizon Europe. And we update that as the new calls are released. So if you want to have kind of a cheat sheet for energy specifically, go there and you'll find it. And I thought for those that maybe aren't as familiar with the process in the audience, if you're there, just a little breakdown of the acronyms. So the first there, Horizon, that's obviously the fund. The second little bit there, CL5, is Cluster 5. So when I say I'm NCP for Cluster 5, that's what it means. It's that particular area of climate, energy and mobility within Pillar 2. The next one is the year, obviously. The destination, which I mentioned earlier, will be 3 or 4 for energy, and then the call. So you'll see as they go through the year, it'll be the first, second, third call. They all go in numerical order, so it's easy to reference. Once you have got the cipher, I suppose, to crack the code, it all makes sense then going forward. So separately, just knowing, I suppose, who's in the audience today, I thought it would be useful to touch upon supports that are available through Pillar 3 as well. Which is the European Innovation Council's programs. Now, I'm not NCP for this myself. My colleague in Enterprise Ireland is, and I can put you in touch with them if you want some more detail specifically on this. But just to highlight, I guess, that this support is available for projects that are very early on in their technology readiness level, so between 1 to 4, and all the way up to 8, depending on which support you're going to avail of. So they're like our RD&D call, we have both open and challenge strands, and the topics that I think that may be of most interest to you that are ongoing in the current work programme are across clean and efficient cooling, construction digitalisation, and in-space solar energy. If there's anyone in that territory, I'd love to talk to you afterwards, just for my own interest. On the EIC transition then, there's a topic on environmental intelligence, and on the accelerator, there's a topic on energy storage and new European Bauhaus. So I'm just conscious of time. I won't dig into the details here, but just to let you know what these supports are for really getting your business off the ground. So if your business as an SME and mid-cap, depending on the particular strand, if your business doesn't have a bankable project, you can't get investment for it. Thanks, Matty. If you can't get investment for it, this is where the EU comes and steps in and says, right, well, let's make your business work in terms of its finance flows. So the first strand there is very much for the start, like high risk, high reward breakthrough technologies. The second then is about validating and demonstrating that the technology is fit for purpose in the relevant environment. And the third is on scaling up your activity for high impact. So that's either disrupting the market or potentially creating a new one. So it's very much for organizations that are at the cutting edge in terms of what they're doing and mobilizing the green transition. To conclude on the funding mechanisms that are available, this is very much a whistle-stop tour to give you a bit of, I suppose, pause for thought or something to investigate further. But the first is on the Clean Energy Transition Partnership, and this varies a little bit to the rest that are on this list. It's a co-fund that's almost like a bridging piece, so to speak. It provides funding up to €200,000 for organisations over the course of 3 years, and SEAI co-funds that with the European Union. There are 7 different topic areas, let's call them, but they're referred to as transition initiatives as part of the programme, and they include integrated zero emissions energy systems, power technologies, integration with the built environment. They're all there. I won't read off the slides. Similarly, the EU Catalyst Partnership and the Innovation Fund are more for your commercialization stage projects. They're focused on quite similar areas. So again, low carbon tech, decarbonising materials and manufacturing, renewable energy generation and storage, and then with the EU Catalyst, which is a partnership between the United States Breakthrough Catalyst, if any of you are aware of it. It's a Bill Gates funded stream, and the European Investment Bank. They're partnered up with the EU. They also have topics on sustainable aviation fuels and CCUS. Finally, I'd just like to mention there that, of course, as my colleagues discussed at the start of this, we are, as SEAI, we are the national body who looks after Ireland's engagement in IEA TCPs, and I know Cian, one of our speakers here today, is engaged as part of that. And what that means is that SEAI is at the table, at a global level in terms of the cutting edge research that's happening in the areas of bioenergy, smart grids, systems analysis, district heating and cooling, ocean energy systems, energy in buildings, electric vehicles, user-centered energy systems and wind. We're also joining the hydrogen TCP, and we have plans to join the heat pumping technologies TCP as well. So SEAI sits as EXCO member, so we drive the policy and the agenda at the executive committee level, and then we run an annual call, which is a competitive call, to appoint researchers to get engaged in the different tasks and annexes that fall without that. There's lots of information there on the SEAI website, and you can contact myself and my colleague Matty, who's just here at the front, about engaging in the IEA programme if you want to know a little bit more. So my very last slide, Matty's already given me the sign for time, and I think I'm running over. So in terms of who to contact, what's next for yourselves, your national contact point is really that person who you want to chat to. So that's myself, Louise Campion, and my colleague Philip Cheesty in Enterprise Ireland, who some of you may be familiar with. And I would say as well, just look to the Horizon Europe Support Network. It's an absolutely fantastic group of advisors, 36 of us across different state and government bodies who look after each of the different research areas. Secondly, I'd say the European Commission do really, really helpful information days, specifically on the work programme for 23 and 24, but also things like lump sum funding and changes that might have occurred since H2020. So this here in the bubbles are just a list of ones that were most recently done in January, and they'll take you through, I suppose, each of the requirements that the European Commission have for the projects that are falling out of that work programme. I'd also say that Enterprise Ireland have funding supports. I won't detail them here because they're very much sector specific, so I don't know if it would be eligible for yourselves or suitable for yourselves, but take a look anyway, just in case. And then the Horizon Europe Ireland has Enterprise Ireland runs a dedicated website for Horizon Europe Ireland. It's a really, really useful repository of information for who to contact, for what's going on in the space at the moment, for kind of your link and conduit to everything that's happened at the European Commission level. And similarly, on the SEAI website, we also have a space there for Horizon Europe and information on my colleagues' programs, the IEA TCPs and the likes. So there's case studies and mailing lists associated with both of them. I highly recommend you sign up. They're very much tailored information that we put out there. So as part of that, we'll be doing a bulletin after this session to give you a summary of everything that's happened. You can tick the specific areas of interest, be it the cluster or for ourselves, the directorate that you're interested in getting insights from. And finally, I'd say, maybe it's the engineer in me that's a little bit of a nerd. I love the dashboards that are there from SEAI and Horizon Europe. They're really, really helpful, not only for, I suppose, getting a sense of what Ireland is doing, but who you can collaborate with, what projects have been done, what the findings were, how you can build on that research. And similarly, Cordis is sort of like a summarized version of that for projects that have been completed. So don't hesitate to reach out to me. My email is there, and my colleagues, Matty, as I mentioned, will put together a bulletin on the supports. I know I've done a very quick sort of whistle-stop tour through some of those, and I might provide some additional detail if there's interest in that. And finally, please do sign up to our newsletter. Thanks so much. I'll hand over to Kerry again.
Many thanks, Louise. You're both doing pretty good on timing. Okay, we're now going to have our first Irish business showcase of research. Ruth Kerrigan is the Chief Operations Officer in Integrated Environmental Services, or IES. Solutions. If you could come up and talk about your experience, that'd be great. Thank you.
Thanks, Kerry. Great presentation so far as well. So hopefully I'm just going to consolidate everything that's been said so far. So yeah, as Kerry said, I'm Ruth Kerrigan, I'm COO for IES. I've been with IES for 12 years. I spent the first 10 years as the head of R&D. So I've been doing this for a long time, for my sins. IES, if anybody doesn't know who we are, we're a software company, and that's probably important to our journey as well, because it does kind of depend on the type of company you are, as to depend on which type of funding you try to access. So as a software company, we're in the energy space. We do energy simulation modelling for design, energy operation, everything from buildings all the way through to cities. So I'll talk to you a little bit about our experience today. So how and why we got involved with R&D funding, the different types of funding we participate in, a little bit about the timeline to write a proposal and the commitments that will be required, when to coordinate, when to partner. We'll talk about the downside, because you can't get away from the downside, but what you can do is you can minimize the downside, and then obviously there's lots of benefits and rewards at the end of it all. So a little bit about IES and our story. So back in 2010, our headquarters are based in Glasgow, and we have an Irish office as well. But the UK Technology Strategy Board, which is now Innovate UK, they opened up a number of projects in the green technology sector. And because we're in that sustainability space, we obviously got invited by a number of companies and universities to participate. So this was before I joined IES, and kind of unwittingly, they were successful in all four, which they weren't really kind of expecting. But our CEO kind of looked at that and said, right, well, there's an opportunity here, there's all this funding here, and then started looking around and saw the EU funding, which was then FP7, and kind of said, right, well, there's an opportunity here to actually now see, do we use some of this funding to develop products that we couldn't develop ourselves? And this was obviously coming through the 2007-2008 recession, and like our software is for the construction sector, so you're obviously trying to sell into a sector that's also just been through that recession. He's also an ex-academic, focused on innovation, so kind of said, is there some ideas and concepts here that we can do to try and fund some of that development that we want to do ourselves anyway? So they started to look around and say, who can we bring in to start to manage these projects? And I had kind of known them from, I was working in Trinity at the time, I'd known them from some past applications that we'd done. But the one thing that I sat down with them and I said was like, you can't just, dip your toe in the water on this. It's like, if you want to apply for, whether it's SEAI, Innovate UK, EU funding, when it comes to research funding, you have to go for it, and you have to actually be quite aggressive with it and be quite persistent with it. You can't, if you're going to do 10 proposals, you might only win one, and you can't kind of do one, do two, maybe do three, and then say, oh, this isn't working, we're going to give up on it. You have to be very persistent, and you have to give it time. And if one project fails, take the learnings, take the feedbacks, and resubmit it. And very importantly, networking is key. You have to, look around, look for partners, invest in that time to get to know people, to get to know who wins in this space, start to work with them, start to partner with them, be very strategic about who you're going to partner with, to actually get the funding in. So it's something that the company, if they wanted to really do it, they had to actually give it a go and invest in it. So they said, okay, let's give this a go, and let's give it a chance, and we'll see what happens. So just a little bit about our journey. So I joined in 2011. We had those 4 projects. Sorry, that should be 2010. I don't know, you're just noticing that now. So in 2010, we had those 4 projects, and then I joined in 2011. And the first 2 years, we kind of brought in a few projects, but actually spent the main of those first 2 years networking. So I literally went to every event on the planet that you could possibly go to. I spent most of my time in Brussels talking to people like that, finding out who wins on Cordis. Literally, I was like a troll going through all those projects. Who keeps winning? What names keep popping up? Right, let's go to an event. I want to talk to those guys. I want to get them to know who I am. So you had to really kind of put that effort in. Started out very, very enthusiastic. Got to 2013. We actually won 10 projects on the back of all of that networking. Stupidly, I was writing 2 projects. Actually, stupidly wrote 2 projects for the same deadline. I decided to call one indicate and one iterate. They're the same deadline, the EU platform, and I have to upload indicate onto one and iterate onto the other, and pure paranoia, because I was like, I'm going to put indicate on iterate and I'm going to put iterate on indicate, so don't do that. Anyway, very, very enthusiastic. Then I had a couple of kids, so it kind of dropped down a little bit. And then I came back and I said, I need help. So we now actually have 2.5 full-time proposal writers in IES, and their job is solely to go do that networking piece, write the proposals, coordinate the projects, bring in the partners. And you can see how, like, through 2018 to 2022, we now have, like, a steady stream of projects coming in every year. The split then across that, so like our success rate is actually pretty good, and I think this kind of demonstrates that if you do invest in it, you can have a good success rate. So we, like, for every 3 proposals we submit, we tend to win 1. There's a good split there across EU, Innovate UK and SEAI. The SEAI one's obviously opened up later on. We actually probably are 50-50 for SEAI proposals, so I mean they're a good stream to go for. There's definitely more work in the EU proposals, but it's a much more transparent review process. So you have to kind of consider these things as well. Like with the EU review process, and I've been on the other side of this reviewing it, you'll have 5 people reviewing your proposal. They will come together, they will meet a consensus. So it's not just a case of, say, one person doesn't like your proposal and will drag the score down. They actually have to come, discuss it, and come to an agreement on what the score is going to be. So it's got a nice transparency to it. I'm sure there's things that always go on like they do with one person really wanting a proposal or not, but it's kind of hard to do that with the EU because you do have to kind of be quite transparent and have that consensus on the review side. So, and then from our side, that's kind of where we tend to see more success, but it is a lot more effort. I'm not going to downplay that one. On the effort, so like when it comes to EU proposals, like you need to be networking 12 months in advance. You need to know who you're going to be talking to, what your ideas are, who you're going to be partnering with. And it can be light touch networking and just starting to kind of get those ideas kind of flowing. You're talking about like the events that Louise mentioned in Brussels, like they tend to open 6 months before the call topics close. So you're in Brussels and you're forming your core consortiums. Like, who do I absolutely need to have in my project to make it a success? And then 3 months before the deadline, ideally you want to be closing that consortium. So, like, again, what others have said, you're talking about partner information, budgets, financials, all that practical stuff. So if you can close that consortium 3 months in advance, it really makes it so much easier for you to actually get your project in. And I always kind of say this, like you could spend 2 months putting loads of effort into writing a proposal, but if you want to win one of these things, it has to be perfect. Like, it's like, I would say, it's like gymnastics. You've got a maximum score that you can get, and they're going to dock you marks every time you make a mistake. So you want to make sure that if there's 10 sections in that proposal, that you need to have every section written to a really high quality of detail. If you leave a section out, you've lost a mark straight away. So if you spend 2 months writing an 80% proposal, that's amazing. It's not going to get you funded. So that's kind of where we say, like, plan ahead, have a schedule for writing, have time and deadlines that you need to tick things off, give responsibilities and accountabilities to partners, and really stick to it. Like, treat your proposal like it's a project and you're going to manage it like a project. The IUK, Innovate UK and SEAI, you don't need to be quite so much. So it's 9 weeks from Friday, 6 weeks writing, but you want to be trying to close those consortiums in the next couple of weeks with your ideas. And as Lucy already said, you should kind of be trying to talk to people now or even before the call topic opens. When it comes to coordinating, we always say it's probably one person full time to write one proposal if you're coordinating, in particular for EU. If you're following, you could probably have one person following 3 proposals. So just to give you an idea of the effort that you need to put into it. And one really great tip that we've kind of done is create templates for repetition. So every proposal, whether it's Innovate UK, SEAI or EU, they all want a communication plan, a dissemination plan, an exploitation plan. Every project has a budget. So you can create these templates, you can have this information to hand, and then you're tweaking it kind of between proposals. There gets to a point where you have to kind of evolve it and change it, because otherwise you're going to start to bore yourself. But yeah, at least you can have something to kind of go off. Coordinator versus partner always comes up quite a lot as well. Should I coordinate? Should I partner? It really depends on what you're trying to do. Coordinating definitely is more effort, but it also means you've got more control. So if it's something that's very, very close to your business, you might say, yes, I want to coordinate this, because we've been on the end where we've got project partners coordinating it and we're the partner, and literally the proposal gets put in at the last minute, our budget gets slashed, we get added 10 more tasks, and nobody's told us until the thing is funded. I was only saying this to a colleague earlier on, where there was one particular project where they slashed 100k off our budget at the last minute. So you know, that's the kind of thing. If it's something very close to your business, coordinating definitely gives you more control. There's more administrative effort in doing it, for sure. You do get an increased budget to do that administrative effort, but that kind of comes back to say, if you're going to make this part of your business, you can put the admin supports in place, hire an administrator, do you know what I mean, and get them to do the administration work. And the other thing I'd probably say is never say no, because the project you think is absolutely terrible is the one that'll get funded. I mean, we used to try and guess and say, oh, this one's got a 10% chance, this one's got a 90% chance, and the 10% chance was always the one that got funded. And you're left sitting there going, how did this get funded? But it did. So never say no. The downsides, not every project will win, as I said, so you have to give it time and don't get disheartened. And it can be very, very disheartening when you get rejection after rejection after rejection, but stick with it, you will get there. There's lots and lots and lots and lots and lots of project meetings, and generally those project meetings, everybody's on their laptop doing their own work and then just looking up when somebody presents, or not even looking up. So they can be a complete and utter waste of time, but you just have to put up with them. It's part of the project. You've got to go to the project meeting. There's lots of travel. Now, since COVID, it's been a lot better. We don't have to travel as much, and we've got a lot more hybrid working, but there is now, you're getting back to it. They want the face-to-face meetings. There's lots of partners you're not going to get on with, and that's not my kids, I promise. But there's lots of partners you will not get on with. And again, experience that. There's so many different personalities. And this one's, I don't know if you can read it, it's a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but there actually is some of those partners who always has gum, and you're like, that's all you're here for, and you don't do anything else. So you just kind of have to kind of, gum always has gum. Yeah. But you're always going to get, I mean, remember, you know, when the Sean McCarthy from Hyperion gave years ago, if any of you've been ever into his talks, and he put up like the 50 personalities of an EU project, and literally you would experience every single one of them. There's lots of administration. You need your timesheets, you need your employee records, you need your receipts. Like every coffee you pay for is going to have a receipt, and you're going to have to keep it. But you know what I mean, if you know what you're getting in for and you put the mechanisms in place, it's very doable. The how to minimize the downside, as I said, make it part of your business, invest in the time, and ensure that the outcomes align with your business. If you do that, then it can be very, very rewarding. Invest in good people, and that's really, really important. You need good project managers and you need good project administrators, and they don't necessarily have to have the technical background for the project. They just need to be very, very organized and keep everybody else on track. You need to hire people who want to do R&D projects. It is not for everybody. It really isn't. Some people, it's kind of like Marmite, you love it or you hate it. So hire people who really do want to do it. Build up your network. As I said, if you can build up that network, and if you start to get in with the people who are winning all the time, I scratch your back, you scratch mine, we'll write one this time, you write one the next time, and that's how you start to kind of to win and build up those project numbers. I'm sure some of you saw my face on the SEAI website. I'm a very cheesy grin, that's my networking face. So you have to go to the room, put on your networking face, and get out there and just talk to people and start to make those contacts. When you go to events, create a partner profile. So bring it with you. This is who I am. This is what we do. This is what our business can offer for your proposal. And you hand that out to everybody, because you can guarantee that people who are writing those projects, they'll be scrambling around going, I need a software partner who's doing energy modeling. Oh, wait, this partner, these were great. This is exactly what I need. So have that and give that out to people when you go to those events, and put your administration systems in place from the start. It'll just make everything work so much easier for you. And when you come to that 6-month reporting and you're like, I need timesheets for the last 6 months, and you haven't been doing it, and now you have to go back and ask everybody to create a timesheet and sign a timesheet, do it from the start, and manage the proposals as projects, as I already said. So why would you bother doing this? So you're probably looking at me going, we're mad in the head. Why would we do it? Because it can be very, 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 very rewarding. So in the last 10 years, we've had 20 million euro of R&D grants. In the first, like when I started with the company in 2011, we were 80 people. We're now 300 people. So in those early years, like R&D contributed probably 25 to 30% of our turnover. as we grew, that allowed us to grow. And then as we grow, obviously that becomes a smaller portion of our overall business. But what it has allowed us to do is we've got 4 new products. So when we started the R&D kind of journey, we had the virtual environment, which is down the bottom right-hand corner there. We didn't have any of these other products here. So we had one product that was for the design of buildings. We now have a product for master planning and urban design. We have a product for building energy management, optimization and operation. And we have a product for virtual networking, for looking at electricity and heat networks. We couldn't have done any of that without the R&D funding. So it's very, very, very rewarding. And it allows you as well to engage with those emerging markets. So a lot of this, like, we launched this product set in 2019. It's probably only now that we're starting to see the benefit and the return from it, because you are always kind of ahead of the curve with that, but you are ahead of the curve. So eventually it does kind of start to pay off. And it allows you to stay innovative. And I think one of the last things I'll just say on that is that, you also get to try new things and fail fast. So one of the things a couple of years ago, blockchain, which I know is still around and some people are still probably doing stuff in it, but we were kind of like, is this going to be anything for our business? And we weren't sure. So we did a project on blockchain and we got EU funding for that, and it was 100% funded, so it didn't cost us anything. We were allowed to explore it. We were allowed to see, was this something to do that we could bring to our business? And in the end, we didn't, and we decided, no, this isn't for us. So we did the project, we got paid, and we failed fast. So yeah, that's me.
Great, thanks so much, Bruce. Definitely some insights there. Okay, next up is Cian Desmond, who's the Head of Innovation with Geo Solutions.
Hi, good afternoon. I hope you're all well. Ruth is a tough act to follow. Fair play to you. That's very informative and entertaining. I'm going to have to exit out of this. And to be honest, there's going to be a bit of repetition in our messages, but it's going to be delivered by a slightly different person using slightly different words. So hopefully it'll be interesting nonetheless. Okay, cool. Yep, so my name's Dr. Cian Desmond. I'm Head of Innovation at Gavin and Doherty Geosolutions. For those of you that don't know us, we're a specialist offshore engineering consultancy based in Rathfarnham, County Dublin. We were founded back in 2011, and interestingly enough, we kind of started off as almost an R&D project. It was EU funding that my boss, Paul Doherty, bought in, was kind of what provided seed capital for the business back in those early days. And since then, we've grown and grown and grown. So to date, since 2011, we've been involved in 40 gigawatts of offshore wind energy projects in 12 different countries around the world. And at the moment, we hire about 160 staff. Started off with a team of 5, up to 160 in a period of just over 10 years. So it's pretty massive growth. So we've got a real multidisciplinary team. So we started off primarily with geotechnical engineers, and that's still the kind of the core of the business and what we offer. But over the 11, 12 years and 40 gigawatts of projects, we expanded out the offering that we have. So geotechnical engineers, structural engineers, environmental scientists, energy engineers, economists, marine biologists, social scientists. So it's this lovely multidisciplinary team, and we all work together to support the sustainable design and development, primarily of offshore wind. But 80% of our business is in the offshore wind energy game, and about 20% is everything else. So my job is Head of Innovation, which is a great title, which I love having. But what do I actually do? So look, the role entails working across the GDG portfolio. So we've got about 8 different service sectors within the company. And what I do is I deal with all the service sectors. Every year, I have a meeting with the lead of each service sector, and I say to them, right, who's your current clients? What services do you offer them? Who do you expect your clients to be in 5, 10 years down the line? What services do you expect to be offering them? And with that conversation, then I've got a roadmap for my R&D operations throughout the year. So we're across the GDG portfolio to ensure we have the knowledge, connections, and expertise to meet the future needs of our customers. That's what the job's all about. At the moment, I got about 40 active R&D engagements. So this is everything from a big Horizon 2020 project, an SEAI project, maybe an Interreg project, maybe a fellowship where we've got a student working with us for a couple of months, or maybe just a small internal funded research project. All told, got about 40 active R&D engagements at the moment. I have got 15 PhD students, 5 senior researchers. If we were a university, they'd be called postdocs, and about 50 part-time staff in 2021. So in 2021, about 50 members of the GDG staff had the opportunity to work in an R&D project. And that's what we try to facilitate, give everyone a chance to get stuck into R&D. And yeah, offering that service is something that I'm very proud of being able to achieve. Our 40 research engagements are divided into 8 what I call research clusters. I won't go into all these in detail because we'd be here a long time, although it'd be fun. Everyone would enjoy it, I'm sure. So the research clusters that we have is floating wind design, advanced fixed wind design, drone services, advanced offshore site characterization, geothermal energy, sustainability, green hydrogen, and climate adaptation. So there's a whole pile of work going on. Each of these would have somewhere between 3 and 6 R&D engagements going on at any one time. Previous to being in GDG, I was in MARI, so that's Ireland's National Centre for Energy, Climate and Marine Research. I was there for 6 years, highly active in mostly EU funding acquisition for the 6 years I was there. Previous to that is in Loughborough University in the UK, where I started my first R&D project back in 2010. So similar enough kind of timeline to Ruth. So yeah, I also have the scars to prove the long journey in the R&D game. So look, I've been working in R&D for about 13 years. I'm going to try and give you the benefit of it in just 13 minutes. Isn't that exciting? Look, I won't claim to be an expert. And one thing I've learned from 13 years of working in R&D is if someone says they're an expert, your alarm bell should start ringing. All right. So I am not claiming to be an expert here. I'm just going to give you the benefit of my own experiences. So what I'm going to try to do is break it into 3 sections. So why do we do R&D? How do we do R&D? Which is very similar to the Ruth's breakdown, interesting enough. And then just some general thoughts at the end. Okay. So first off, why? Why do we do R&D? So the main objective of why we get involved in R&D, no matter who you are and what your background is to solve problems, okay? Everyone that's working in an R&D project is there. The kind of thing that unifies people is to solve problems. In academia, they've got kind of underlying motivations. So they're there to solve problems, but they're also looking to graduate and train PhD students, retain postdocs, and the kind of big thing that gets academics out of bed in the morning is to publish papers. That's the financial reward in the academic world, is to get papers published. So that's the big reason academics tend to be involved in R&D projects. From an industrial perspective, I couldn't find one with a euro there, so we'll go with dollars. From an industrial perspective, it's slightly different. It's about accelerating growth. So you're there to solve the problems that have been set out by the funding agency, but your kind of underlying reason is to accelerate growth within the company. The way I kind of visualize a company is like this. It looks like a little bit of a petri dish, perhaps, with different service offerings or bacteria inside in that petri dish. Not to kind of completely murder the analogy. So that's the kind of way I visualize it, right? So you got this kind of your economic footprint of your company and the things that you do within the company, whether you're a software house or you're a consultancy or you're producing some kind of widget, right? So that's your kind of offering. And then what tends to happen, and what happened with GDG, is you got one service offering, and then your clients start saying, hey, could you do this? And you go, yeah, you know what, we could do that. So you start doing it, and then that grows itself, and then it maybe gets bigger, and it splits into 2 separate service offerings, right? So that's kind of the way it's tended to work with us in GDG. An example there would be, we were doing a whole pile of ground modeling. So taking geophysical and geotechnical data from offshore surveys and turning it into a numerical representation of the structure of the seabed. And we're doing that, and we're having a great time doing it. And then our clients were saying, look, could you get involved earlier? Can you help us when we're actually planning the survey to make sure that we're collecting the right data and collecting it the right way? So we did, and then we grew this service sector, which is survey management. And it grew into a whole service sector, and it's been very successful for us. So it's just the kind of the way I kind of see the kind of growth within a company. And then if you keep repeating that and you keep growing, you grow your petri dish or the economic footprint of your company. The kind of R&D that we get involved in then is there's kind of 2 types, kind of 2 broad kind of categories of R&D that we indulge in. The first one is where we are refining our existing offering. So we're doing something, we get involved in R&D so we can do it better. All right, good example here, one of my colleagues, one of my PhD students, David Boyd, who are partnering with Queen's University Belfast. Really smart guy. What David's doing is we've been doing some work previously in GDG where wind farms are coming to the end of their lifetime, and people are trying to decide what should we do with it. It's 25, 30 years old, what happens next? Broadly speaking, your options are decommission, repower, or extend, and it's there's a framework, well, we're developing a framework, in fact, to come to the resolution of that question. What David's doing is using artificial intelligence and machine learning. So taking all the SCADA data that you have over the 25, 30-year lifetime of the project and using machine learning to try and get some insight into the remaining useful operational life within that turbine. So please God, he'll be successful. I have no doubt. He's a great guy, and hopefully that will become an expanded service offering that we have within the company. The other type we get involved in is where you, and this is the real beauty, or for me anyway, where the real kind of power of R&D and the real reward for being involved in it comes from, where it's kind of doing something that's slightly outside of your petri dish, right? So an example here. So we recently drew down some funding from the SEAI, in fact. And what is building on was that we've done lots of work in green hydrogen. So we've been doing lots of research and consultancy work in the area of green hydrogen. We've also been doing lots of research and consultancy work in the area of port infrastructure development. So if we know about green hydrogen and we know about port infrastructure development, we bring something together here where we're looking at future fuels for seagoing vessels. So we partnered up with our friends in Marai. So we got close collaborative links with Jerry Murphy's group down in Marai. We got this lovely 3-year project, budget of about 600K, where we're looking at future fuels for the shipping industry. So it's drawing on our hydrogen expertise, it's drawing on our knowledge of port infrastructure, it's leveraging those close connections with the academics, and it's building essentially what will be a new service offering for us. I'm hoping it's going to be very successful, and then we'll get to get a bigger petri dish. Right, so it's the two types of research projects that we tend to get involved in, so developing a new offering and refining an existing offering. What I see it as is this real catalyst for existing growth. But I think I've underlined existing there. I think it's absolutely critical that you aren't completely dependent on funding, that you've got organic growth happening already, and then you can get a little injection of R&D funding, which acts as an extremely powerful catalyst. But you have to have that underlying organic growth, in my opinion. We can maybe tease that out a bit later. And I'll touch on some reasons for that a bit later on. So that's it. So you got the academics who are graduating their PhDs, retaining their postdocs and publishing papers, and then industry that are looking to accelerate growth. But the thing is, you need to collaborate together, right? None of these things happen in a vacuum. It's very, very rare you'd have a project that's completely industry-led. There's usually some collaboration happening with the academics. A kind of added benefit then is all the PhDs and all the postdocs are going to be looking for jobs at the end of it. There's a great opportunity to build those relationships and recruit from the academic institutions. And you're not poaching staff here. That's how it works. That's what universities are set up to do, is to grow the next pot of talent, make sure they've got saleable skills, and let them move over into industry. So it's very rewarding in that regard. So how do you do it? I'm going to drink some water. Right, so how do you do it? So you need to look at yourself first, right? So don't go looking out there and see what's going on in the world and what funding opportunities there are. Just kind of look internally, right? And see where you are at the moment, what your current service offering is, and where you want to get to, where you want to be 5-10 years down the line, all right? And then you got to start bridging the gap with these scopes. So scope 1, scope 2, scope 3, scope 4, whatever it takes to get from where you are to where you want to be. Those scopes could be anything. It could be staff that you need to recruit. It could be software that you need to acquire and get trained up on. It could be processes that you need to define internally. It could be tools that you need to develop. It's going to vary massively depending on what type of area you're working in. Once you have looked internally and you understand what your needs are, then I'd start going out and seeing what the funding landscape looks like. National funding, we are blessed in Ireland. There's an incredible funding landscape. In the job that I have at the moment, I'm fortunate that I get to work across multiple jurisdictions. Australia, Netherlands, USA, UK, France. And really, what we've got in Ireland, it's a much richer funding landscape than the countries that we've been operating in. So obviously, top of the list, you can't beat them, SEAI, right up there. So these are the ones that I tend to go for. So this is in the energy space and the offshore energy space. So it's kind of, my experience. I'm sure Ruth would have other pots that she'd be going for. So the SEAI, the EPA, the Marine Institute, GSI, Enterprise Ireland, and SFI. So go look at them, and you got to work out which is the best fit for your ideas. You got to understand the motivations of the funders. All of these funders have got different reasons why they're giving away primarily taxpayers' money. So the SEAI, very simple. They're trying to save the planet using renewable energies. It's nice and easy to understand their remit. The Marine Institute, they're promoting excellence in marine research. GSI promoting excellence in geosciences. Enterprise Ireland are trying to sell stuff to people, to be crass about it, and then SFI are kind of doing a bit of everything, So it's just understand what the motivations are of the different funders. The good way to do that is to look at previous projects that have been funded, understand what the consortium looked like, what they were doing, review the call text. The SEAI put out a very detailed call text, read it, see what type of projects they're looking to fund. Contact relevant academics. You can see the academics that have been funded in the past, get in touch with them, have a chat, see how the funding works for them, and really contact the funding agency. All of these organizations here, they've got lovely people working there. Get in touch with them, have a chat. They're generally very open, and they're keen to get new entrants and new quality projects up and running. So once you know that, so you know what you want to do, you know what the funding landscape is, then start applying. Get out the pen and start writing. And as Ruth alluded to, I think at the outset, you're better off partnering. So join in with someone that's done this in the past. It's a whole new world that you're going to get exposed to. So get in as a partner first and understand the ropes and how these consortia come together and how the projects are run. Then we've got EU funding. So as Louise said, there's millions and billions available in the EU world. It is a whole exciting and scary world. I'm glad Louise introduced the, you said it's like the Bible, right? And it really is, right? So it's a huge book of text that is not always clear what it means, but the way that you can interpret the Bible is to talk to the priests who are Louise and the NCPs, and like it's like you're reading, go, what do they mean? Like, what's the deeper meaning here? And the only way that you find out is by talking to the people who are involved in the production of that text. So it's they're the Europe's representatives on Earth. So I'd highly recommend that you have a chat with them. So that's the NCPs. So we got 15 in Ireland. They are covering everything from health to agriculture and everything in between. I had the wrong man's name down here. I got Mark Sweeney, who's actually the NCP for climate. Obviously, Louise is for energy, and Philip Cheesty is kind of both energy as well. Yeah. Brilliant, yeah. So absolutely fantastic resource, and you know they're like the high priests. You know they know how the texts work and what the text means. They also know the people that have been successful. They can make those valuable introductions for you. After the NCPs, there's the Science Foundation Research Centres. We've got 16 of them in Ireland, covering everything from sustainable milk production to Internet of Things. You know, they're 16 of them covering absolutely everything. Each of those, as far as I'm aware, has got a EU grants manager, very knowledgeable people. And look, the SFI, the way the model works is they have to bring in industry money. So they're really keen to talk to industry and understand what our interests are. And they can give you a great introduction to the academics that are going to help you to get a successful research project, and also help you navigate the tangled web of the EU funding landscape. And then, like you are today, attend workshops, training, matchmaking events, and just understand how it all fits together. And as Ruth said, there's a low success rate. Okay, it's like what, 10, maybe 20% success rate for EU funding, and that's one of the reasons why I really think you shouldn't be relying on funding. It's great to get; it gives you that catalyst, that acceleration for growth. But you need to, the fundamentals need to be right. You need to have your own organic growth ticking away. The way an EU project typically looks, yep, no problem, thank you. The way an EU project typically looks is you'll have work package 0 or work package 1, which is project management. You'll have work package 4, which is communications. So work package 1 is, or 0 is organizing the whole thing, and communications is making sure that people know about the lovely work that you're doing. And then you'll typically have 3 to 5 to 6 technical work packages, each of which are composed of tasks. Okay, so that's the introduction to EU parlance there for you. So when you're starting out, a good role to go in for is a task lead. You're going to have a limited scope here. You might get to tick 1 or 2 at a stretch of your target scopes off the list within the project, but there's a limited writing effort. You've essentially got to send on your scope to the coordinator and support them with any additional text that they need. So the benefit of that is that you can be in multiple proposals. You can submit the same text scope to 2, 3, 4 different proposals. And look, you're essentially buying lottery tickets here. So buying multiple lottery tickets can be advantageous. The opposite end of the spectrum in terms of effort then is the coordinator. So this is brilliant because you get a large scope. You could potentially get everything that you want to get done in one project. You also get to influence the scope of the task leads and the work package leads around to your own particular interests, which is usually beneficial. But there is a tremendous writing and coordination effort if the project gets awarded, a tremendous coordination and administrative burden. And typically, it's seen as being poor form to be coordinating a task and be involved in other tasks. And to be honest, it's kind of hard to if you're writing one anyway, because it's such a huge effort. So if you're coordinating, you're probably going to be involved in one call, one proposal per call. which is going to reduce your success rate because you're buying lottery tickets, as I said. And then a work package lead is kind of maybe the happy medium and fits in there somewhere in the middle. And look, it's like a peloton, right? You got all these people with their different jerseys, all kind of racing towards get the research funding in. The person up the front is breaking through the wind, they're putting in their hard yards. The people at the back are just maybe coasting along. But what I would strongly encourage is to take the opportunity to get up the front. All right, that's what we did in MARI, it's what we did in GDG. So obviously you got to work out how the whole thing works from a funding landscape and from a project management perspective. But when an opportunity comes up to lead, I would highly recommend that you grab that opportunity. Even if you don't get the funding, but you bring together a really strong proposal, you're going to get a name, you're going to get a reputation. I think Irish people in particular were good communicators, we're good networkers, right? And I think in my experience, a project that's coordinated by someone from Ireland, it tends to go well, and people tend to get on quite well. And that echoes what Louise was saying previously. So I'd highly recommend get in there, give it your all, blast through the wind and break the wind for the people riding in your wake. And then what happens is you get exhausted from it, you can drop back into the peloton. But what will happen is the phone starts ringing, right? So you don't have to go out chasing research funding. If you develop a reputation as being a good coordinator, a good proposal writing coordinator and potentially a good project coordinator, the phone starts ringing. People are asking you to get involved in their proposals, to join their pelotons, to stretch the analogy. Really critical to maintain focus, right? So when you're in this peloton, you're just kind of cruising along and you're going wherever it's going, right? But you need to make sure that you're getting value out of it, that what you're doing in those projects is what you set out to do. You can very quickly get derailed and end up doing something that isn't adding value to your business. So just keep looking back at where am I trying to get to? Is this actually adding value? So maintain that focus, absolutely crucial. One thing to be aware of as your company grows, your funding rate goes down, as we saw earlier on. That's just the way it works because of the EU rules and regulations, right? Your funding level starts dropping down the bigger your organization gets, and your overheads as a business start going up. If you got 2 people in the office, you got a low overhead. If you got 150, you got quite a high overhead, right? So what that can mean is if there's a 65% with 25% effective funding rate, depending on what the overheads of your business are, you might actually be down at a 40% effective funding rate. So you just really need to keep an eye on that bottom line and see if it does make sense for you to continue your journey in the R&D landscape. And like what we ask ourselves as a question, could it be faster and cheaper to fund this internally? Big, long timeline, right? So if you got an idea, you want to develop a widget, right? You got to get out to Brussels and encourage people to include text which would be favorable to you in the call text. The call comes out, you might be 6 months building your consortium. You apply for it, might be 6 months before you find out that you've got it, another 3 months before the project gets up and running. And then when it gets up and running, you get all the administrative burden associated with it. So it's very long timelines. So ask yourself, would it be better off just taking the funding that we're going to have to put into this and pay for something short, sharp internally? Just some general thoughts then to wrap up. Sorry, thank you for the notice. Some general thoughts. So look, as I said, it's a really effective catalyst for organic growth, but I firmly believe that organic growth is fundamental. You can't be fully dependent on it. It's just too slow and too uncertain to be your only vehicle for growth. I will say national funding is a lot better. So if you're talking maybe 10 to 20% at the EU level, for national, you might be 30 to 50%. So it is better nationally, but still it is slow and it is uncertain. So you have to have that, the fundamentals need to be right. You need to have that organic growth. My kind of general experience with EU projects in the energy space is that they're moving to larger and more applied projects. So when I did my own PhD, it was a load of fluid mechanicists working with CFD models and playing in wind tunnels. Those days are kind of gone now. It's kind of more kind of large scale applied research. And really that's kind of good for industry because we've got infrastructure that we can do testing on, for instance. There's a bit of an opportunity there with Brexit. We don't know what's happening. I don't know. Maybe Louise does. If they're in or out, it seems to change very regularly. It brings a lot of, well, I don't mean, anyway, I mean in terms of the funding and how the funding works. And it is uncertainty around it, right? So uncertainty brings risk. So people are starting to kind of maybe move away from UK partners a bit and looking for Irish equivalents to jump in there, we have found. So there's a bit of an opportunity there associated with that. We're the only English-speaking country left in Europe, right? And proposals are written in English, so there's a good opportunity in that regard. Yeah, I think that participation in research funding is absolutely superb for what we do, which is developing services, and what Root does is developing software. But my feel is that it's less so for development of technologies or new widgets, and maybe we can tease out the reason for that a bit later on. I really do not get addicted to funding. I've seen businesses that just get addicted to it, and their kind of raison d'etre is to draw down research funding and complete research projects. Just make sure that you're doing it for something that's adding value to your business, and that you're not addicted to the funding. Open source. So there's new rules and regulations, the fair data principles, that any data that are collected in R&D projects have to be put into the public domain in a fair. I also forget what it stands for: findable, accessible, interrogable, and reproducible. So it basically means that you have to be able to put the data out there so people can reproduce your experiment. That is a big burden. It makes it more difficult to manage your intellectual property. It can be done, and it's a good thing for society. The taxpayers' money, the fruits of it are being shared with the world, but it just makes the kind of IP management that bit more challenging. But there's a huge opportunity there. If you see any R&D project that's happening in an area that's of interest to you, you can pick up the phone, you can send an email saying, "Hi guys, I saw your research, looks really interesting, can I have your data, please?" If they don't respond, you can email them, put their project officer in CC. You'll get the data eventually. And that's the way it works. As taxpayers' money, those data are for everyone. So, you can really make it a full-time job, just making sure that drawing down the data that would be of value to your business. Yeah, the network and reputation. So being involved in R&D projects it's a catalyst for growth, but also the network and reputation. You just can't put a value on that. Being working in Europe and drawn down funding and coordinating a project, it's got significant reputational advantage that's hard to quantify. I'm going to finish with one last slide. Dun, dun, dun. ChatGPT. Absolute game changer. Look, we'll have a chat about it later, but I think this is just going to change the face of how funding works, to be honest with you. So look, I've been involved in writing research proposals for over 10 years now. And when I saw this coming out, I was like, yeah, right, a computer can't do what I do. But I gave it a go, and it's phenomenal. So we drew down some funding from the EPA last year, which was to do with the reuse of construction demolition wastes as raw materials for construction projects. Really lovely project we're very excited about. It took me and one of my senior researchers a lot of time to write that text. We were working on it for weeks. And then I said, geez, I wonder how ChatGPT would get on. So we'd already won the funding at this stage. So I threw the text in, and the response that came back was frightening. And honestly, it's no joke. Like with a day of effort, you could get to about 80% of where you need to be in terms of the proposal text, which is usually which usually takes weeks. So it is going to change the face of R&D funding. I don't know what it's going to change it to look like, but it's certainly interesting. Thank you.
And slightly over, but nice cheat sheet at the end. The only thing is, if everybody's using it, the bar is raised and they're still competitively bidding, so still an even playing field. Right, we're going to open up to the floor now for questions. Mike will come down to you, and yeah, if you could just say your name and where you're from.
Hi, I'm Oscar. I'm with Biotas, and we've a EU project with IES, the iBecome project, so we're involved in that as well. So interesting to see that. But I guess the question I have really is, say we're operating with a much smaller PMO as opposed to IES, who has IES and IES R&D specific for that. So I guess my question really is, if you want to have like a steady state flow of like 2 of those transformative projects for long term, how much of an effort is that? Say like if you've like 2 or 3 project managers trying to run this and write proposals, is it feasible to run a PMO and also, give much attention to writing proposals as well? Do you need specific people to just even pay attention to this?
I think it depends on how enthusiastic your people are. Honestly, there's a couple of different ways of doing it. Some companies, and particularly the European companies, they would have proposal writers who also manage the projects. So they would write the proposal, and then whoever wins that proposal, they become the project manager for that project because they've knew the proposal very well, or they followed the proposal and things like that. We tried to do that and didn't work for us because the people, you get really good project managers who hate proposal writing, and you have to like proposal writing because it is like, it's hard and you need to be good at it. And vice versa, like our head of proposal writing now, he hates project managing, doesn't want to touch a project manager. So I think you just have to kind of find what works best for you. But I think it still goes back to what I said at the start, like 1 in 10 will get funded. So if you're going to do it and you want to bring 2 in every year, if you say my target is 2 every year, you need to be submitting, you need to be in 20. Now you could just say, I'm going to, as Keane kind of said, you could say I'm going to write 2, and I'm going to have 1 person dedicated to writing them, and I'm going to have 1 person dedicated to following others, and do it that way. So there's lots of different ways to skin it, but you do have to kind of be aware that if you do 5, you might win none of them. So it's volume, and then you'll get better at it. And like again, as Keane said, you'll get the phone calls from the good people who want you in their projects, and then your success rate will get better. Yeah, hope that answers.
Thanks for that. I might just offer Lucy to respond to just a comment in your presentation, Ruth, on the evaluation and transparency of the programme. So maybe, Lucy, you could talk to the national or RD&D programme in that respect.
Yeah, so I suppose the question's around evaluation and how the evaluation process works. So all applications are reviewed under the same valuation criteria by multiple evaluators, and there's an averaging of the marks across the multiple evaluators that leads to a ranking that determines how many projects can be funded on that ranked list until our funding runs out. But yeah, it was interesting to hear Ruth's comment there on the EU. I know there's different programs, and different EU programs have different review processes, so that might have been particular to Horizon, maybe, was it?
That was Horizon. I think there's like Keane put up way more funding proposals like SFI and Interreg and all. They all have different mechanisms. I think in our kind of experience, like when you have a review process that has like no consensus, you might have one person who doesn't like the proposal. With every proposal you write, there's an element of luck. I always say it's kind of like poker. You could have the best hand, but it's always going to be who has a better hand. And then you also have that little bit of luck element as well, as to, did I get a good reviewer or a reviewer that fully understood my proposal? Now it's up to you to write it in a way that the reviewer is going to understand it. Absolutely, that has to be key. But you will sometimes get a reviewer that might be more in your space than somebody else, and they're going to pick up on it quicker or easier. So you just have that element of luck as well. And I don't think there's, obviously it's difficult for everybody to organise a review process and get people to review them and then give comments, and there's the burden on the other side of it as well. I think the EU have been doing this for a very, very long time, and they obviously put a lot more money into it, because when they do that consensus, they're paying for people to go to the EU to sit down and meet face to face, and they're paying their reviewers like pretty significant, funds to do that. So I think it's different. It's horses for courses. Different systems are going to have different review processes, but in one way, it's kind of why we've been more successful in EU than others. Like Innovate UK is a great example. I think SEAI, 50% for us at SEAI, so obviously we're doing something right there. Innovate UK, I think we're 1 in 10. And like that, in that one, we find that the review process is terrible. It's definitely the worst, because you could have somebody that just hates your proposal and it drags the whole score down. So it just depends, I think, on the different mechanism. I don't know much about Interreg or the other ones. Yeah.
Yeah. This working. I don't think it, like, as a person submitting proposals, like, I don't think you need to get too caught up in how they're evaluated. Just put in the best proposals you can and hope for the best. Like, you can get kind of caught up in all those details, like who's reviewing them and what's their background. But to be honest, I think it's wasted time and effort, and where you're better off just focusing on getting the best proposal that you can together. Look, I used to be involved in the European Academy of Wind Energy, so that's all the senior researchers and professors around Europe that are working in wind energy and drawing down research funding and doing teaching activities in wind energy. And all of us were submitting Marie Curie ITN applications, which is a very particular type of EU funding. So we were all getting back the evaluations, which are quite detailed, so we were able to compare them. And just seeing that, like, really, it made it very clear to me that it is a lottery. You get the best proposal that you can, and you cross your fingers. And then sometimes what would happen is we'd have what would nearly funded, and it'd be submitted to the same call again and come in slightly lower, and it's just your hostage fortune. And as Ruth said, it depends who's reviewing the text. So don't get too caught up in it. I feel like I'm giving a prep talk to the people doing their English leaving cert, It's like, don't worry about the marking scheme, just get stuck in.
Praying helps.
I hear the alarm, but we'll do a few more questions.
Thank you. Sorka Schnicker, I'm the Innovation Manager for SEAI Electricity. Cian, you touched on the time it takes to pull together your consortium, build a project, put it in, hear nothing for 6 months. So how have you managed that in terms of having that vision for what we need to be doing 2, 3, 4 years ahead with things moving so fast in the energy sector?
Yeah, well, that's a good point, and you can get caught out, right? So something that seemed like a great idea when you submitted the proposal, it becomes evident over the course of the project that it's not anymore. But look, that's just the nature of it. But how do we manage it? Like, the simple answer is that we don't rely on it. That if we get R&D funding, it's a catalyst for the organic growth that we have already, but we're not hooked on it. We're not dependent on it. Yeah, and I'm convinced that's the model that needs to be pursued. It's great to get, but you can't depend on it.
Any more questions from the floor? Okay, but while you think of it, I might just ask one. Just in terms of source of funding for R&D, obviously you can go to a bank and get a loan, or you can use own funds, or you can do state EU funding. What's the decision process on the source of financing that RDD within a company?
That's a lovely question, and to be honest, something that we're kind of developing internally, because we're gone through this phase now where we've grown significantly as a company over a short period of time. So the funding rates that we can draw down, it kind of makes it more marginal if it's something you should be doing or not. So it's something that we're looking at the moment. But I think the tactic that I'm taking is kind of dividing it into smaller chunks of effort. So you got like a 4 to 6 week project, which is highly focused, high impact, and then funding it using the money that you would have to match fund if you were to secure external funding to do it, if that makes sense.
Yep.
So it's kind of more targeted, and then obviously you've got less budget, but also you can move faster. You don't have all the administrative timelines. You don't have to spend all that time networking and writing proposals. So it's kind of it's a case by case decision really, which you go for.
Would it be an IP ownership component? Because if it's state, or it is, you have to do the IP agreements, but if you get a bank loan, there's no other.
Yeah, like IP management is a big area that you need to focus on. But I wouldn't say it's kind of dictating the decisions that we're making. It's more about how quickly do we need to do this work, and how much can it be divided into smaller parcels. Right. Like the IP would be kind of, because look, we're not developing widgets, right? We're offering consultancy services, so getting the knowledge is more important.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for that.
Maybe just to add to that, I think like with and for the previous comment, like if you're talking short term and you want to get something done in the next 6 months, R&D funding is not your route. Just don't even go there. It's your innovative longer term thinking, longer term strategies, and the stuff that you might have a bit of uncertainties around as well. Fully support Cian with saying it has to be part of your organic growth and your business model, but it might be something that you've also got a little bit of uncertainty of, say, do I want to actually do this or not? And that's where R&D funding can be very valuable, because it gives you the opportunity to explore it and see does something come out of it as well.
At the end of your presentation, you're saying something that was really accelerating, or say multiplying the work that you're putting into actually making your proposal is ChatGPT. But how are you? And I use that nearly every day, and we're getting our software developers to actually, it'll write them code, so it's incredible. Like, it's basically multiplies our output. But I'm wondering, how do you use that to write proposals? Say for me, we might only have a few people who can actually do that. So I'm very interested in understanding how that can actually multiply our output in that way.
Yeah, so to be clear, I haven't used ChatGPT to win any funding, firstly. But what we did is we just did a test. We said, right, we won this funding, we're really happy with it, put significant effort into it. How would ChatGPT do? and it got about 80% there. So in a day's effort. Sorry, to be honest, that was quicker. We were kind of like maybe an hour tinkering around with it. I think if we spent a day at it, we could have got a lot further. So it's frightening, you know. It changes how funding is going to be administered, and I firmly believe we need to come up with a new way of doing it. And I don't know what that looks like now. It's going to be interesting to see how it progresses. But that wasn't your question. Your question is, how do I use it? So I haven't used it for proposals, but what I'm using it, so I'm dyslexic. So I can have difficulty with spelling, but spell check catches that usually. But then I can use words which isn't caught by spell check, but it's the wrong word. So spell check doesn't catch that. ChatGPT does. So if I fire the text into ChatGPT and say, "Can you check this for me?" it will say, "Yeah, you're an idiot." No, I won't. It's very friendly. So it'll highlight the mistake I've made. Then also, if I've produced a block of text, I can fire it in there and say, "Can you review this for readability?" It would make some suggestions. You know, the hardest part with writing is looking at a blank page. So what I've done, is fire in 3 to 4 bullet points and say, "Turn this into text." Turns into text, you review it. You know, I find it yeah, it's just something I'm starting to use more and more in my day-to-day work. Yeah, but I kind of went through mixed emotions when it first came out, but I always see it as a tool, you know, and it's kind of like the same way when the calculator came out, we're like, "Oh God, you have to do your mental arithmetic," you know, and then when the spell checker came out, people were like, "Oh, you should know how to spell." But I don't know, it's just game changing, you know. I don't know what it means, what it's going to look like in the future, but let's see.
Interesting where AI will bring us, I suppose. If there are any more questions, I'm kind of conscious you possibly are going to another session, or okay. Okay, I will just close and thank you all for coming, and thank you very much to my panel members, colleagues, and indeed our 2 businesses showcasing. It was very informative and interesting, and we're here for questions if you do have time. And just a little shout out to Joanne Sheehan down there, who was part of the Fitzgerald. Oh, who was part of the program design many moons ago before her before her existing job in Enterprise Ireland. Yeah. Well, when we remodeled the program, Joanne was in the boiler room with us. So yeah, so it's delighted she's here today. And our other colleagues dotted around the room, so you should spot us. So just pop over if you'd like to know any more about what we're doing. Okay, thanks so much for coming.